Yo, what's good everybody? Hope y'all doing well. In this video, I'm going to be showing y'all how you can make placement ready beats for 21 Savage, pretty similar to his recent project American Dream. I'm not going to waste too much time, so let's get right into it. So the goal for a placement ready beat is to make sure that the beat is appealing to hear for the artist, and it also has plenty of room for them to actually rap on it. So as you can tell with this first beat, for the melodies, I only have 4 different layers, all of which are pretty simple, and then I just have some basic drums right here. Going into the first melody sound, I got this bell preset from an Av McCree Electro-X bank, and the vibe I was going for with this was like kind of a more digital Metro Boomin-esque vibe. Plugins like Electro-X and Analog Lab are probably the best for this. Melodically, this beat is pretty similar to Sneaky off of 21's recent album. This type of beat, you probably want to have it sit between 150 and 160 beats per minute. So this beat is sitting at 153 beats per minute. So for the actual construction of this melody, I use the D sharp minor scale. I have the scale pulled up in the background here, and you can tell that I'm pretty much just using 4 different notes. So I'm starting off the melody with the root note, or the first note in the scale, D sharp. For this first measure, I'm just alternating between the low octave and high octave versions of A sharp, which is the 5th note in the scale. So I pretty much have the same pattern copied over here, except instead of D sharp and A sharp, I have F and F sharp. Then I took all these and copied them over for the 3rd and 4th measures. And then the only difference for this last part here is that I went from F sharp back down to F. And the reason why I picked F and F sharp is because they're half step apart on the scale. The only pairings of notes that are like this in the minor scale are the 2nd and 3rd note and the 5th and 6th. And the notes that are half step apart in the minor scale create that minor vibe to it. Or in other words, that's what's going to give you the dark vibe for your beat. That's why I wanted to use these notes a lot within my melody, so it has that dark vibe already in it, just in the basic top melody. So for this melody, I put a whole bunch of effects on it. For the first thing in this effects chain, I put on this privacy preset from Portal from my Resonance Portal kit. I'll have a link to that in the description. Then I put some RC20 on the Vinyl 3 preset. I wanted to give the sound a little bit of detune and also add some reverb to it. Then I put on this EQ that cut out some of these low mids here. Then I put a sound goodizer on it just so I can make it a little louder and make it sound a little more crisp. So going into the second melody, it's the exact same thing as the first one, except it's an octave up. The effects chain is pretty much the same as the last one. And I just have both of those so I can alternate between them during the beat so it doesn't get too boring. Moving to the third melody sound, I got this pad from the Av McCree Savage Mode Bank in Electra. And this pattern is insanely simple. It's just a D sharp paired with an A sharp, and then the top one's dropped an octave for the first half. And then for the second half, I just have it up 1 octave, and then I just copied it over. This is just meant to add a little bit of depth to the melody, and so it harmonizes a little bit with the other components. And to finish out the melody, I just have these 2 accents, which is just 1 accent manipulated 2 different ways. And this is from my Resonance multi-kit. The accents by themselves sound something like this. This is what all of the melodies sound like put together. Now that we got that out the way, let's jump into the drums. So moving into the first sound, I just have this snare. Most 21 Savage beats have a pretty aggressive snare, especially the dark ones. So try to get a snare sound that's pretty aggressive, or you could use like a clap and snare combo. Then for the hi-hats, for this beat, I didn't want to make my rolls too detailed. Pretty much all 21 Savage beats use 2-step style of hi-hats, and you could just add the rolls as you feel like. I just wanted to go a little simpler on this beat, so that's why I just have only these few rolls here. As for these rolls right here, this one is using the 1/6 beat snap to grid, and then this one over here is using the 1/2 step snap to grid, and the last one is just the regular line snapping. Now moving on to my next pattern, which is my snare. Again, similar to the hi-hats, I tried to keep this one kind of simple, so I just put it on the end of the first beat on all the even measures, and then I threw in this kind of stutter roll here in the 6th measure. Similar to the hi-hats, you can put more down for the snare rolls. And also if you want to spice up both your hi-hats and your snare sounds, you can go down to where it says control and put it on note pan. You can change the note panning on your individual snare or hi-hat notes. Then for my next pattern, I put in an open hat and I just put this down on the 4th beat of every odd measure. And I just wanted this to be kind of consistent. I just wanted to add this sort of element to make the beat a little bit more catchy. Then lastly, to put it all together, I just put down my 808 pattern. All it is just putting it down on the typical 808 spots. So now putting it all together, this is pretty much what the final beat sounds like. Alright, now moving on to the second beat. The tempo of this beat is 172 beats per minute, so this is a little bit more up-tempo compared to the last one. In terms of the overall vibe and the bounce of the drums, I would say this is probably closer to his song Red Rum. I didn't want to use a sample on this because I didn't want my video to get demonetized. So for my first melody sound, I went into Analog Lab and I got this Coding Crazy key preset from the Drowned in the Void Bank by HZE. So going into the actual MIDI, all this is I'm using the basic C minor triad and just using variations of it. All right, so putting the C minor scale behind this melody here, I'll start by explaining the second chord here. So this is a basic C minor triad. If I erase these notes, you can see the full scale, and all this is using is the 1st, 3rd, and 5th notes in the scale, which make the basic C minor chord or C minor triad. As for the first chord here, it's a C suspended 2 chord, or in other words, I'm just taking this middle note here, which is the 3rd note in the minor scale, and moving it down to the 2nd note in the minor scale, which is why it gets the name suspended 2. And I just have the same basic pattern here, just repeating for the entire sample. And like I said earlier, those half step apart notes give it that dark vibe, which really helps in getting that 21 Savage type of feel to the melody. And then for these bottom notes here, I just placed these on the 3rd note of all the odd measures, and these are just the root note of C just put an octave down. And then for the last one, it's just the root note of C put an octave up. For effects on that, I just put on an EQ where I rolled off the lows. Then I used this Surge XT effects plugin, and I used this preset just to give it a little bit more texture. So once I had my first melody down, I selected the first 10 measures in the arrangement. Then I went to the mixer track where the melody was routed to, and I armed it by highlighting this red. Then I hit Alt R, set the mode to song selection and cut remainder, and then hit start, which then gave me this audio clip. So I took that 5th through 6th measure and put it over here. Then I copied this over. Then I had the 3rd and 4th measures play right after it and duplicated it like that. So that's what's shown right here below. And that sounds something like this. And then I took all that and pitched it down by 1/2 step. So now it's in the key of B minor. Eventually, I just consolidated that into its own clip and put it back into the arrangement over here. And I also took this same clip and dragged it over here and then clicked on the top left and hit Make Unique. In the audio clip settings, I just pitched it down by 1 octave, so I have an octave down version of it too. Now moving on to the last melody sound, which is the cinematic piano in keyscape. And I just have the bass notes laid out here, which is just these lower octave B notes or the root note of the scale. And that's pretty much it for the melodies. So putting all of those together, it sounds something like this. So now moving on to the drums. Overall, the formula is relatively the same. I have a clap and snare combo that just sits on the 3rd beat of every measure. Then I have some basic 2-step hi-hats with some pretty simple rolls. And then same thing for the snares as the last one. These are actually simpler than the previous pattern, where I just have it hit on the end of the first beat on all the even measures. I just threw in a couple of other different notes. And then I also have an open hat which hits on the fourth beat of the fourth measure. And then lastly, of course, I have my 808 pattern, which is a little bit more complicated than the previous one. It's just the same root note for the entire pattern. I just went in with this slice tool and just chopped it where I felt like it sounded good. And then at the end here, I just have a little octave of it. And now we have a final beat that sounds something like this.
Roll up, Tess.